The question lands and your throat closes. Your chest tightens, your mouth moves, your answer comes out cleaner than your thought. You call that confidence because the room rewards speed. I am going to show you how forced instant judgment steals your private voice and turns borrowed certainty into something you start wearing like identity. It happens in places. A clip flashes past your screen. A headline lands half read. A friend drops a verdict into the chat with a laughing emoji, and the silence after it feels expensive. You feel your pulse climb before you feel your opinion. That sequence matters. When your body is pushed to speak before your mind is ready, your answer is no longer discovery. It is compliance with tempo. The system does not need your honesty first. It needs your speed. Speed makes you easier to classify, easier to sort, easier to predict, and much easier to recruit. A slow mind can still belong to itself. A rushed mouth usually belongs to the moment that cornered it. This is why the pressure always sounds harmless at first. Give me your take, say where you stand, pick a side, be clear, be decisive, be real. None of that language sounds violent, but it carries the same demand. Produce a finished self on command. Make your inner life legible before it has even become legible to you. Under that demand, you stop listening inward and start fitting outward. You do not search for the most accurate sentence. You search for the sentence that will protect your status, preserve your image, and keep the air from cooling around you. That is the theft. Your voice is not taken by censorship first. It is taken by pace. Look at the smallest version of it. A post appears, sharp enough to sting, vague enough to trap. The comments fill with instant certainty. You know you do not know enough. Your stomach tells you that before your language does, but your thumb is already hovering over reply because hesitation now looks like weakness, and weakness gets translated into complicity. So you borrow a tone from the crowd, press send, and feel relief before conviction. Hours later, the relief is gone, but your name is still attached to words your deeper mind never approved. That is one of the ugliest parts of this system. It trains you to mistake the end of pressure for the arrival of truth. The heat drops, so you assume the answer was right. The likes come in, so you assume the sentence was yours. Approval enters after the fact and edits the memory. Soon you are not remembering what you believed. You are remembering what got rewarded. Elsewhere, the trap looks softer. Someone asks your opinion in a room where everyone is already leaning one way. It happens over a meal, in a line, on a call, in the casual hush before a group decides who is normal and who is trouble. You feel the tiny delay in your own body. Your eyes break contact for half a second. Your jaw sets. That half second is your real mind trying to arrive. Then you betray it with a polished sentence that sounds socially intelligent, because social intelligence, in that moment, means disappearing any sign of inner friction. You have probably done this and called it maturity. You have smiled, trimmed the sharp edge off what you really thought, and delivered a version that could survive contact with the room. Then you went quiet on the way home, not because the conversation was over, but because part of you knew you had just watched yourself get outvoted by your own fear of social drag. The damage is not only moral, it is sensory. If you keep speaking before you know, your inner signal weakens from disuse. The body stops sending detailed warnings because you keep overriding them. The throat tightens, the stomach drops, the shoulders brace, and still the performance continues. After enough repetitions, you stop saying, "I do not know yet." You start saying whatever keeps the pace smooth. That is how a person becomes eloquent and false at the same time. You become easy for systems to use. Speed outruns honesty, not evil systems in a theatrical sense, ordinary systems. Feeds, group rituals, fast-moving status environments, any place where the fastest readable answer gets treated as depth. The more quickly you declare, the easier you are to index. The easier you are to index, the easier you are to handle. A person who still needs time cannot be processed cleanly. A person who has learned to answer on impact can. Watch how the prompt is designed. It never says, take your time and tell me what survives thinking. It says, react. It says, what is your immediate response? It says, if you are silent, that tells us enough. The frame is rigged before content even enters. Delay gets moralized. Nuance gets recast as evasion. Reflection gets accused of cowardice. Then the same culture that rushed you into a premature answer turns around and judges you by the answer it rushed out of you. They lied to you about speed. Fast answers do not prove strength. They prove the pressure found a way inside your timing. Once that lie settles in, you start self-policing before anyone even asks. You see a topic coming and begin rehearsing. You draft future reactions in the shower. You edit your face before you enter certain rooms. You reach for ready-made language not because it is true, but because it is available. This is how borrowed certainty becomes identity. You wear phrases long enough, and the body stops distinguishing costume from skin. The system becomes strongest when it enters private moments. You are alone with your screen, no room pressing on you, no live audience, no social penalty in the air. Still you feel a hurry. A clip loads and your body leans forward as if someone is waiting on your verdict. No one is there, yet your pulse acts supervised. That is the point where the machine has crossed the threshold. It no longer needs witnesses. It has installed a pace inside you. This is the pivot most people miss. You think the problem is public pressure, but public pressure is only the first delivery method. The deeper damage arrives when you become your own enforcer. You feel a complicated reaction rising, then kill it because the cleaner answer is easier to carry. Your hand goes still above the keyboard. Your stomach drops because you know the sentence you are about to type will not be honest. Then you type it anyway, not to persuade anyone else, but to get free of the discomfort of unfinished thought. That is not expression. That is self-abandonment under fluorescent speed. The scariest version is not that the room silences you. It is that the room teaches you to silence yourself before it has to. From there, the pattern spreads. Your private reading gets thinner because you no longer trust slow understanding. Your conversations become more strategic and less alive. You start respecting people who answer fast, even when their answers are brittle. You start distrusting anyone who says, I need more time, because they threaten the ritual you have built your social safety around. A machine that began outside you ends by recruiting your own standards. In some circles, this gets praised as being sharp. In others, it gets praised as being informed. The costume changes, the mechanism does not. The room wants immediate legibility because legible people are manageable people. If your reaction can be pulled on demand, then your interior has been shortened into a public function. You can see the theft clearly in the aftermath. After a rushed exchange, your body does not feel settled, it feels scraped. You replay the moment while washing your hands, while staring at a traffic light, while pretending to listen to the next topic. The sentence you should have said arrives late, fuller and quieter. It has texture. It includes doubt without collapsing into weakness. It sounds more like you, but it is always late because your real voice is not optimized for spectacle. It is optimized for truth. That does not make your real voice fragile. It makes it incompatible with coercive tempo. A deep signal often arrives slower than a social one. Shame is fast. Imitation is fast. Borrowed outrage is fast. Borrowed righteousness is fast. Actual discernment takes longer because it has to survive contact with contradiction, memory, and cost. It has to pass through the body instead of skipping it. That is why force, speed, and moral pressure are always paired. Speed alone would feel crude. Moral pressure decorates it. Be a decent person. Be informed. Be brave enough to say it. Be clear. By the time those commands land, your body is no longer deciding whether the thought is true. It is deciding whether you can afford delay. Truth gets pushed behind survival. Then survival gets renamed principle. Do not confuse slowness with passivity. There is nothing passive about refusing to let a public tempo dictate the shape of your inner life. Delay can be a form of sovereignty when the room is trying to turn your reflex into a confession of identity. The strongest person in that moment is often the one who can withstand 10 seconds of social static without handing over a counterfeit self. You have felt that static. A table goes quiet. A chat thread stalls after someone says, well, eyes land on you. The pressure is microscopic and total at the same time. Your heartbeat gets louder than the conversation. Your mind offers a sentence you do not believe just to restart movement. The counterfeit answer shines because it promises immediate social oxygen. Your real answer is dimmer, slower, less decorative. It asks for risk. That is why the counterfeit usually wins. Every time it wins, the inner hierarchy shifts. Performance rises, signal drops. You may still think of yourself as honest because you are not inventing complete lies. But the system does not need total lies. It only needs strategic speed. Half-truth delivered too early can deform a life just as effectively as direct coercion. It leaves your outer self efficient and your inner self underused. Consider the manufactured ritual that now passes for authenticity. A video appears cut from a larger event. The caption is already accusatory. The first 100 comments have the same temperature. By the time you arrive, the emotional weather has been set. You are not entering a field of inquiry. You are stepping onto wet paint. Every path has already been tinted for you. When you feel your own uncertainty, it does not feel like intelligence gathering. It feels like stepping out of formation. So you read faster than comprehension can manage. You scan for cues rather than facts. Which sentence is safest to repeat? Which moral phrase will signal that you belong to the right species of person? Your body knows what is happening. The shoulders lift. The breathing shortens. The eyes stop looking for detail and start looking for shelter. In that moment, your nervous system is not pursuing truth. It is searching for social cover. That is why the modern demand to be instantly legible is so effective. It does not attack thought directly. It overfeeds consequence. It teaches you that every pause might be interpreted, clipped, remembered, or held against you. Once that fear settles in, your mind starts pre-formatting itself. You stop approaching events as living realities and start approaching them as tests you might fail in public. A system built like that can survive on fragments. It does not require context because context slows down the sorting process. It does not reward restraint because restraint interrupts the spectacle of quick classification. It prefers symbols to realities because symbols move faster and punish less of the audience's attention span. The cost of that speed gets paid by your interior. You become easier to read, but harder to feel honestly from the inside. You can test this in yourself without turning it into a performance. Recall a moment when someone asked for your stance and you answered immediately. Not because you had already thought deeply, but because the demand itself felt unbearable. Afterward, the body did not feel proud. It felt relieved in a cheap way, as if pressure had been evacuated rather than truth expressed. That feeling is diagnostic. Relief is not always evidence of alignment. Sometimes it is just evidence that submission worked. The middle of the trap is where identity gets rewritten. Once you have issued enough premature answers, other people begin treating those answers as your stable self. They quote you back to you. They build expectations around your reflexes. You get invited or excluded on the basis of language that may have come from one rushed night, one bad clip, one overcharged room, one moment when your body chose air over accuracy. Then you adapt to the identity that those moments created. The costume gets fitted from the outside. This is why a person can wake up and feel estranged from their own public image without knowing exactly why. The image may be made of real sentences, but they were produced under stolen conditions. They were spoken too early, under too much social heat, with too little time for contradiction to do its refining work. The words were real, the ownership was partial. When you practice that sequence, the world does not become quieter right away. In fact, it may become louder. You will hear how many prompts are built to trespass. You will notice how often people interpret hesitation as an opening to push harder. You will see how many institutions pretend to invite thought when they actually require instant readability. That can feel lonely at first. It is still cleaner than living on borrowed sentences. One more misunderstanding has to be cut out here. This is not about becoming neutral so no one can pin you down. Neutrality can be another costume. The issue is authorship. Did the sentence come through your own tested interior, or did it come from a pace you were too uncomfortable to resist? One preserves self-respect. The other trains obedience while flattering you for being expressive. You may not look powerful when authorship returns. Sometimes you look inconvenient. Sometimes you disappoint a hungry crowd. Sometimes you lose the instant warmth that comes from joining the chant on time. But you keep something larger. You keep the bond between body, thought, and speech. Once that bond is intact, even a hard answer feels cleaner. It does not scrape on the way out. And that cleanliness matters more than most people know. The body remembers every time you used it to transport a sentence it did not trust. It remembers the heat in the cheeks, the compression in the chest, the flatness afterward. It also remembers the rare moments when you let the room wait and your real language arrived. Those moments create a different kind of strength. Not the brittle strength of instant stance, but the steadier strength of self-contact. This is also why you start feeling numb around your own opinions. People say they no longer know what they think. Often that is not because they are incapable of thought. It is because they have trained themselves to issue answers before thought finishes forming. The mind loses confidence in a process that is never allowed to complete. Eventually, your inner life stops volunteering detail because it expects interruption. The repair begins with a brutal recognition. Not every opinion deserves immediate publication, and not every silence is weakness. Some silences are evidence that the self is still intact. Some delays are the sound of your own judgment refusing to be manufactured in public. If a room punishes that, the room is telling you what kind of product it expected you to be. You do not have to become vague to resist this. You do not have to become detached, superior, or theatrically above it all. You need something simpler and harder. You need to stop treating urgency as proof. Urgency proves only that something wants access to your mouth before it has passed through your mind. Once you see that, a great deal of social theater stops looking impressive. It starts looking hungry. Then a different standard becomes possible. Instead of asking whether your answer was fast enough, you ask whether your body stayed with you while you spoke. Instead of asking whether the room relaxed, you ask whether your inner signal got edited out. Instead of admiring immediate clarity, you study the conditions that demanded it. This does not make you slower in every area. It makes you slower exactly where speed is being used as extraction. That change is visible in tiny behaviors. A headline lands, and you do not rush to merge with the first interpretation available. A friend fishes for a clean declaration, and you refuse the bait of polished certainty. A thread invites performance, and you leave it untouched long enough for your own language to arrive. None of that looks dramatic from the outside. Inside, it is a transfer of ownership. You can feel the difference in the body. The throat does not tighten in the same way. The jaw does not clamp around a sentence it does not trust. Your breathing stops serving the room and starts serving perception again. That is the moment the system loses some of its leverage. It cannot sort what you have not rushed to display. It cannot recruit a self you have not flattened for convenience. People who benefit from your speed will call this hesitation. They may call it confusion, fragility, or evasiveness. Let them. Those accusations are often just the tantrum of a pace losing control over you. A system built on instant readability always treats depth like malfunction. And once you understand that, you also understand the cultural trick. The demand for immediate stance is sold as courage, but courage without contemplation is often just obedient theater. Real courage includes the willingness to disappoint the room long enough to remain in contact with what is actually true. That kind of courage looks plain. It does not trend well. It does not charm an impatient crowd. It does something better. It leaves your voice attached to your own nervous system. If you keep surrendering that attachment, the cost will follow you into decisions, loyalties, and the way you describe yourself when no one is asking. Any room that rewards speed over truth will try to live inside your timing. Now that you see the pressure, you get your timing back, and they lose the right to turn your reflex into identity. Your real voice usually arrives after the room gets bored. Subscribe if you want to keep catching the mechanism one video before it catches you.